How are you? Welcome back. It's first week of May and it's now first cut season. So I didn't decide to look at any old first cuts with you. I thought we'd take the opportunity to discuss Herbal Leys together. Now yes, where I am today, I am in England, and these Herbal Leys have been established under the SFI schemes that were introduced over the last 18 months. But I want to discuss about Herbal Leys or multi-species mixtures overall, regardless of where you are in the UK and any type of system that you have, and also hopefully remove some of those myths around them with regards to their overall performance and how they achieve those end goals of quality forage on farms. We're going to be discussing, as I say, Herbal Leys or multi-species mixtures, whichever you prefer to refer to them as. They aren't anything new. They've been hot topics of conversation. There've been plenty of questions about them for many years now from growers, wondering whether or not they could fit their system, what they're about, what they could achieve. We know that in other countries they are, or at least quite a few of the elements of these mixtures, very popular. So let's look into them and see what they're all about. For me, I've always personally referred to these mixtures and favoured to do as multi-species mixtures. Is exactly what it says on the tin. They're a mixture of multiple species. And actually, I would argue that the branding around a Herbal Ley doesn't always necessarily paint that picture. There's something about that terminology which possibly suggests that we're compromising overall yield and quality with this sort of type of mixture. Always been that way, but it's odd. Now, as a seed specialist, I do find this odd. And I don't know where it's come from. I don't know whether or not it's bad experiences with the wrong mixtures or just that overall concept and that misinformation that's out there. Now, for those of you who know me, know that I'm not necessarily some big regen activist and I go around hugging every tree that I walk past. I'm balanced. I'm looking to try and get the best from both the environmental benefits but also maintain production and quality as we go. There is the opportunity to get these from the likes of multi-species or herbal mixtures. But like I say, there is a lot of myths around Herbal Leys, and hopefully this video will answer some of those. Well before the likes of SFI or any environmental schemes were a thing, multi-species mixtures have always been a hot topic of conversation. A grower may well have read an article perhaps, listened to the virtues that they can bring to their farming system and wondered whether or not it would work for them. They may have possibly also heard about the benefits with regards to drought resistance. They may be in a drought prone part of the UK or the type of ground that they farm, but somehow it's still never always been enough. Majority of farmers would remain on the fence without the requirement of a scheme in place to take that plunge and start establishing these mixtures, as we've seen in the last 18 months. Regardless of the amount of these mixtures that have been established over the last 18 months, especially in conjunction to the likes of SFI, there still remains a lot of questions though. How will they fit? What are they about? In some cases, what's even in them? So let's take a little bit of a look in terms of what it takes to put one of these mixtures together. The grass fraction should always form the base of any mixture. It's there to give ground cover, longevity, and of course overall yield and quality. The likes of legumes tend to be the likes of red or white clover maybe, or possibly even sandfoin, there to provide extra protein but also fix nitrogen as they go. With regards to herbs, there can be many options that are included. The two big hitters though would be the likes of plantain and chicory in particular. They have the incredible taproot system on them, so they are incredibly drought tolerant and also able to mine minerals throughout the soil profile that's then added into the forage. Straight away and quite quickly and simply, we meet the aims of the ultimate requirement for this sort of type of mixture and what they can bring, and also majority of the aims for any schemes that these could be included in. We're lifting overall yield and quality, or at least maintaining yield and quality of forage. We're reducing the amount of inorganic N that needs to be applied, but also we're building soil biology, we're building resilience, structure, diversity, and also drought resistance. So that's the principles behind a multi-species mixture in its very simplest form. Of course, there's way much more detail and nuance required to formulate a specific mixture, especially when it's requiring to meet the aims of a scheme. But it's been really fascinating actually over the last 12 to 18 months with regards to the conversations that you have with regular customers. In previous years where they're specific on certain variety selection, certain species selection within their mixtures for a more conventional type mixture, when it comes to the likes of these multi-species, the understanding, which is totally understandable, around these mixtures and around these species that are included can be very limited. This is where the risk for me lies. If it is that we aren't looking for that level of detail that we would normally look to achieve, this is where we risk losing that balance of meeting the aims of a scheme but maintaining overall quality of forage and yield. Now, we could all talk to the cows come home regarding what we believe in is the right thing to do with regards to the likes of SFI or other similar schemes on offer throughout the UK at any given point. But what we do know is that in relation to the likes of these Herbal Leys and multi-species mixtures, there has been an incredible uptake over the last 12 to 18 months, driven by the schemes. So those growers who were traditionally talking about these types of mixtures, possibly hadn't even considered them maybe, have now fully engaged. They've been established. But for me, the question still remains, what have you established? Now, this is such an important question for somebody such as myself. Regardless of any schemes or requirement that you're looking to establish these mixtures for, that initial level of detail just hasn't been requested in the first instance over the last 18 months. We haven't had those detailed conversations or been requested to have those detailed conversations about what varieties and species are going into a mixture. In the grand scheme of things, the majority of the time, the only inquiry and detail that you get is it just needs to meet the aims of that initial scheme perhaps. Therefore, this is where the risk lies. This is where it comes back to those original thoughts about these types of mixtures, how they perform and how they fit. Do you know what has been supplied in the bag of grass seed that you bought to meet the aims of these types of schemes? Do you know what's already been established? Are you already questioning the performance from that mixture? This is where we could trip ourselves up. Now, when it comes to that initial seed purchase for a mixture such as this, they are on average going to be higher than your traditional conventional grass mixture. That's because they have these high value legumes, they have these high value herbs within them. Suppliers are also aware that in the majority of cases, of course, understandably, growers are wanting to try and retain as much of that hectare payment from a scheme as possible. Because of this, more often than not, you'll tend to find that the driving factor behind the mixtures that have been put together can be cost over quality. And this is where the biggest risk lies. Not only for establishing these mixtures regardless of schemes or within a scheme. If it is that you have a mixture that's supplied based on cost rather than quality, no matter how much you're getting paid to put these mixtures in the case of these, £382 a hectare, you can easily burn through that with regards to the loss of quality and overall forage from those. In many cases, the types of varieties and species that are going into these mixtures are suboptimal for the likes of significant and regular forage production. It's more common than not to see the likes of creeping red fescue in these mixtures. Now, I planted creeping red fescue at home only a couple of years ago, That was in my lawn. They're amenity varieties. They're not full fat production varieties that we need to maintain within these mixtures. This is where the risk is. This is where those myths start to come out, that the performance questions around these types of mixtures is compromised because of how they're put together. Now, by utilising where I am today, I'm trying to paint that picture for you in terms of getting the most out of these types of mixtures, especially when they're required as part of a scheme. Maximising overall quality and quantity. The footage that you've seen, the crops you've seen behind me, with regards to any first cut that will be out and about around the UK, I hope you can see there's been very little compromise that's been given. These lays were established less than 12 months ago. They had a light first cut and then 2 good cuts after that. They were then grazed with sheep after. With the first week of May, and now we've got significant first cuts from them. Last year, the silage that they produced added an extra 2 litres a cow when we started to feed it. That's huge. This is where the benefits come from the likes of these mixtures. But unfortunately, more often than not, the mixtures that are supplied don't give you that return. Going back to the benefits that these types of mixtures can give you, again, that sward density, that sward diversity, that overall quality. We're all used to growing high legume content grass mixtures, might be red clover mixtures for example. These multi-species mixtures shouldn't be too far detached from those, giving that extra diversity and resilience. But they need to be formulated properly. They need to be formulated with varieties of grasses in particular that you would see in a conventional mixture. No corners cut just to save potentially £10 an acre in terms of a seed cost. This is the key to making sure that the likes of multi-species Herbal Leys can fit within a rotation, meet the aims of a scheme, but still maintain overall feed quality and value. Before I get too far on my high horse, making sure we take consideration of the points that I've just discussed, ensuring that the quality of these multi-species mixtures, whether you're establishing them in a scheme or outside of a scheme, is critically important. We can't afford, regardless of the requirement, for these mixtures not to be producing. Yes, they can still return those environmental benefits, that varied soil structure that we're looking to achieve, but they also need to perform, because if they don't, we end up in the situation that we've had probably for the last 10 to 15 years. Again, these conversations, discussions around these types of mixtures, but limited engagement. I think the pinnacle came for me actually partway through last year. It was actually online. I saw a grower had posted about taking the brown envelope, taking the payment, and almost heading away from food production. Again, I don't accept that. £382 a hectare to establish multi-species mixtures within SFI. You can rent ground out and make more money than that. If it is, we are looking to establish these for all the right reasons. We need to ensure that they're also productive for the systems that we have in place to continue. It's not only critical that we ensure that the quality of these mixtures is high, but also the flexibility and the versatility of the options that you have available. Time and time again, I've seen it where just a bog standard multi-species mixture has been supplied. That's fine, but that's not what you'd necessarily ask for in your existing grass rotation requirement. To me, there's no reason why these types of mixtures shouldn't be as flexible and adaptable to what you need them to be as well. Do you want them to be grazing? Do you want them to be cut and grazed? Do you want just cutting, long term, short term maybe? They need to fit your system, not just tick that box. Now don't get me wrong, the idea of having just a simple option is quite attractive to me, especially when we have an extensive grass seed range already. But the introduction of the likes of the SFIs, the SAM3s, now the CSAM3s, has created an expanded overall requirement for these types of mixtures. So much so, we've actually ended up with 16 of them over the last 18 months to cater for both SAM3 and the expanded offer of CSAM3 and the differences in there. Not only is it the duration and the management type, but it's the requirements in those mixtures. Are you grazing so you don't want to have red clover in there and avoid the chance of bloat? Are you looking to cut the mixtures? Therefore, probably chicory might not be best for you. If chicory is left to get away and get extended, if we have a break in the weather, it will just become big and woody and stemmy and probably die out after you've cut the crop. So what's the point of having it in there? They need to be as flexible as your existing mixtures and overall be as successful as it possibly can to avoid the situations we've had and the feedback probably for the last 10 to 15 years. With regards to that feedback, we're only about 18 months into SFI and already we're getting some commentary back about some of these mixtures that have been established, those mixtures that I say aren't really fit for purpose, and the conversations around their lack of performance. Again, going back to that old rhetoric of we're just growing a field of weeds, and I get that. If it is that these mixtures haven't been correct in the situation that they've been established and supplied in, people are going to be disappointed. Growers aren't going to get from them what they wanted to do, and therefore, as I said before, put that £382 a hectare into reality in terms of what they've actually sacrificed in terms of overall yield versus the payment that's been on offer. To give you an insight into the crops that you're looking at with me today, this is actually our Master Ley SAM3 cutting. It's designed as a multi-species herbal ley for a multi-cut system. As I say, these mixtures already received 3 cuts last year after only being established towards the end of May. So again, giving that perfect example, a live active sample in front of you as to what can be achieved from these mixtures if we just make sure it's right from the beginning. All that aside, I hope this video has painted the picture of what can be achieved if we maintain that overall level of attention to detail with regards to these multi-species, herbal ley, whatever you want to call them, mixtures. The options that they have, the flexibility that they have is still there, just as our conventional grass mixtures are, but that extra level of diversity is something to be valued. Again, I go back to the point that I understand that some of these mixtures and the concepts around them can be daunting, they can be alien. We're not used to handling differences in terms of herbs and legumes maybe, but do pull the mixtures apart just as you would do your conventional mixtures. Give the scrutiny to the varieties that are in them, even if it's just a part of the mixtures that you understand and you're well versed with. If you do that, these mixtures do have a place. They can give you a return, and we can maintain overall yield and quality and still meet the aims of a scheme where required. Please also do bear in mind the benefits that these mixtures can bring, especially from that nitrogen fixing point of view. As I say, a lot of the aims of these schemes that they're associated with is to give these crops minimal overall artificial nitrogen. Take advantage of the crops that they are, take advantage of the species that's within them. Again, more and more often than we see routine applications of nitrogen versus actually what we've got in front of us as a crop. Utilise the benefits that these crops can bring, and especially with regards to the CSAM3, the extended offer from SFI for these herbal leys. If you are engaged with those, bear in mind you are only limited to 40 kilos of bagged N per hectare per year for those types of mixtures. As a business, we've actually held quite a few farmer meetings to discuss specifically the ins and outs of multi-species mixtures, making sure that growers are maximising overall potential, but also maintaining quality and potential from these types of mixtures within their rotations, rather than just sacrificing ground to receive potentially a payment if they're part of a scheme. There is nothing more important within these sorts of types of options to maintain overall quality and yield, because as I said before, we can easily burn through any payments that may be received if it is that we compromise in the field. Now, I appreciate I've used the backdrop of first cut for these multi-species mixtures today to paint the picture. I wanted to use this as probably the most extreme end of what people perceive can't necessarily be achieved with the likes of multi-species mixtures, but of course they're brilliant for grazing as well. All those benefits that we see from added quality and diversity is of course passed on within the grazing mixtures. That almost growing TMR in front of livestock, those increased daily live weight gains, but also resilience during those drier months. Fantastic for either beef or sheep in particular, but they do need managing and maintaining, especially if it is that we have a fantastic year and growth is brilliant. If you have the likes of chicory in those mixtures, I've mentioned it already today, the fact that chicory can get away and can be quite hard to manage can create a few issues in terms of keeping it back and maintaining it within swards. But if you can manage it, or if you have a mixture without the chicory in, they're absolutely brilliant for grazing livestock on. So there we have it, multi-species herbal ley mixtures. Hopefully I've answered some of those questions and possibly bust some of those myths that have always surrounded these sorts of types of mixtures, that look, the answers haven't necessarily even been there before a lot of farmers throughout the UK have engaged with these, or have yet to engage, and possibly missing out on the benefits that they can bring. The diversity from both a forage and a soil point of view, and also that concept of almost having a growing TMR in front of livestock. They do bring massive benefits within any forage rotation. It's just about making sure that we keep that quality there, the attention to detail in terms of the mixtures that we're looking to establish, and ensuring that the management of them is correct for what you're looking to achieve. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now.